There we go.
If I seem to be distracted, it's because I have a young friend of mine at sitting on.
There we go. All right. I think we're recording over here. Are we recording now? Does it say we're recording?
I heard I got a message that we were recording for the past 15 minutes.
Oh, well, that was Jason's note taker. This is the
Oh,
actual sound. So, okay.
oh,
All right. So, first of all, now that we're recorded, we'll make sure everyone knows that we have a big discussion over here, a big Talmudic dispute about whether or not we should be going for the Knicks or for the Spurs. Um, and these are very important, types of discussions because I don't know if you remember Jeffrey a number of years ago when there was a when there was a very famous Super Bowl between the Patriots and the Falcons, and
Mm-hmm.
a rabbi from the New England area and a rabbi from the Atlanta area
Mm-hmm.
had a duel going. And this one would have to get donations for that one, and this one get donations for that one, and this one would have to come give a class for this one's program and that one. So it created some good. So as long as we can create some good Torah around it, it's going to be okay. So what exactly are we can spend some time figuring out the merits of the Spurs versus the merits of the Knicks. Who has more Torah near them? There's some great Jews in San Antonio. Definitely some, probably more Jews, near the Knicks. But, we could discuss, the political component of it, how there are people involved with the Knicks that like Israel so much. So that certainly is a downside for them. But, we could keep on going. But we'll stick to the Torah for the rest of the evening.
excuse me, I'll be right back.
Okay. Well, I'll make sure to talk loud. So the this week's Torah portion is called Behaaloscha. So we're still stuck in that position where Israel is going to read one Torah portion, and the diaspora is going to read another Torah portion.
Oh.
So just like we have, it's going to take a few weeks for us to catch up to each other. So this week in the diaspora in America and anywhere outside of Israel, we're going to read the book, the portion called Behaaloscha. Bamidbar Nasa Behaaloscha. Behaaloscha starts off talking about the famous menorah, right? Which is similar to the menorah that we know about and the one that we light on Hanukkah, but it's not exactly the same because the one inside of the Beis HaMikdash, inside the temple, had 7 branches, 3 on each side, and it had a shamash in the middle, one in the middle, and the one in the middle obviously lined up with God. The 3 outside ones, the wicks leaned in towards the middle. And so different than ours. Ours, as we know, has 8 really /9 because we got 8 nights of Hanukkah, right? The 9th one being the shamash, being the extra, helper light. So there's so the Torah portion opens up talking about the laws that are involved with the menorah. I just want to point out one quick thing about the menorah. It's interesting to think about because I know we've discussed this in the past, but whenever it comes up, I like to just kind of throw it in there a little bit. So there were many different vessels inside of the temple, inside of the Beis HaMikdash. And each one had a very unique role and what kind of merit it provided for the Jewish people, the energy it provided for the Jewish people while it existed, while we had the temple. So the menorah was representative of what we would call the tzaddik or the Talmud Chacham, which would be the righteous person or the Torah sage. And we know there's 2 parts of the Torah. We have the Torah shebichsav, the written Torah, which is like the 5 books of Moses and the 24 books of the Tanakh, right? That's going to be what we know as the written Torah. Then there's the oral law, which is more like the Mishnah and the Talmud, and that's what traditionally was passed on from generation to generation. It was traditionally passed on from generation to generation and not written down. But when the era came where the Jewish people were being exiled and they were going to be dispersed throughout the world, so the rabbis of that time and the leaders of the generation at that time got together and said, look, although it's supposed to be an oral tradition, this part's supposed to be passed down from generation to generation, from parent to child and rabbi to student, teacher to student, if we don't write something down, some sort of, way to remember this, we're going to lose it forever. So really what this means is that the menorah, really, each of us is really a menorah, because we're part of the tradition of passing something on from one generation to the next. We share with our children, we share with those around us, right? Part of our job. So when you deal with a written Torah, so then we have a Torah scroll. It's written upon a scroll. When you're dealing with the oral law, though, what's the scroll, right? What's the parchment? Really, we're the parchment. Each and every one of us is the parchment for the oral law, because it's written upon us, because we are the ones that are going to go ahead and share that and give it to the next generation. So really, we become a parchment, so to speak, for the oral tradition. So that's really the idea behind the menorah. Just an interesting, idea to think about. Another amazing topic in the Torah portion. I don't have it in front of me. I have to remember. If anyone remembers afterwards, to text me. Text me and say, Noach, put a chumash in your car. Put a Torah book in your car. I used to have one in my old car. I had one. And now it's not here. I wanted to quote the verse for you. But we learn in this week's Torah portion something amazing. Absolutely amazing. So the Jewish people, they went ahead and they were going to bring the first Paschal lamb inside of the wilderness. Right, the first Paschal lamb they brought was in the land of Egypt itself, right, on Pesach night. Right, that was the first Paschal lamb. Now, this week's Torah portion speaks about where they're going to bring the first Paschal lamb of being inside the wilderness. And the challenge is that there were some individuals who had become spiritually impure. They came into contact with some dead bodies, which we'll leave that story out for right now. And if someone comes into contact with a dead body, that makes them have some sort of spiritual blockage, and therefore they're not able to go ahead and participate in the usual sacrifices and offerings that were brought inside of the Beis Hamikdash. Now, when these guys came into contact with those bodies, it was actually doing a service for everybody else to remove these bodies. So when they did that, they now stepped into this state where they could not participate in the first Paschal lamb, the Karban Pesach of the wilderness. And they were very bothered by this. So they come to Moses, and they say, Moshe, Lama Nigara, why should we lose out? We didn't do anything wrong. We were taking care of the community. So there's got to be a way for us to participate in this Pesach experience. How can we be excluded? So Moshe, talks to Hashem, and they come out with a plan, and they do this, what we call the Pesach Sheni, which actually traditionally someone would have that opportunity. Nowadays, people will actually make sure to eat matzah on that day. So basically, a month after Pesach, on the calendar, on the 15th of Iyar, there's an idea to eat matzah. And the hope always is that if Mashiach didn't come and we didn't get a Beis Mikdash to bring the Paschal lamb in time for regular Pesach, the hope and the dream is that, it'll come in time for the second Pesach. But this year it didn't work. Once again, it has not worked. So God willing, we'll get there by next year. So what I always find amazing about this, what people point out, is a tremendous lesson in how we approach our mitzvos and our Judaism. Do we see our Judaism as a burden? Meaning all of the mitzvos and the rituals that we're supposed to do, and I got to do this, and I got to do that, and there's so many laws, and oh my gosh. And yes, it's overwhelming, but do we see it as a burden, or do we see it as an amazing opportunity that we have to engage with our Judaism, to engage on working on a relationship with God, to engage on becoming a better version of ourselves through doing the mitzvos, through studying more Torah, through being active Jews? How do we view it? So these individuals show us and tell us the way that we're supposed to view our Judaism. Do not view it as a burden. Now, this not always so easy, but it's just a reminder for ourselves to spend a little bit of time, think about a mitzvah or two that we don't do, and then we can ask ourselves, why don't I do that mitzvah? So sometimes the answer is, I didn't even know that mitzvah existed. That's one answer. Another answer might be, it kind of cramps my style. It's not, kind of a little bit different than everybody else if I'm going to do that. And then there's the mitzvahs that it just doesn't seem so fun, or I don't really understand it. So a lot of reasons why somebody might not do a particular mitzvah. It always reminds me of the story of the fellow who, I may have shared this story before. This fellow, he wanted to start, he wasn't ready to, to keep kosher, like all in kosher. But it wasn't something that he grew up with at all. He didn't really understand it. But he felt like he wanted to, he was going through a few rough things in life. So he decided, I'm going to try to make a spiritual jump and see if it adds a little energy to my life. Or maybe it'll change the way things are going, and, things will go a little better for me. So he told his family, we're going to start, we're no longer going to eat seafood. Like, we're not going to eat, crab and lobster and shrimp and all that, all those kinds of things, the crustaceans. And his family traditionally did, they like either shrimp or lobster, like once a week for part of that was like their dinner once a week was shrimp or lobster. So it comes to the first week of no shrimp and no lobster. And man, his family was not happy with him. They're like, Dad, just because you want to do this holy stuff, like, that's your problem. That's not my problem. And he said, come on, guys, I just need you to stick with me with this. We got some tough stuff going on. Let's try to do this together. And they kind of, rolled their eyes and, oh, sure thing, Dad, whatever. Yeah. Right. And then they went with it for a week or two, and they just were so frustrated. And so he called me up and he says, Noach, Rabbi, whatever he called me, he says, what am I supposed to do over here? Like, I really want to do this. I want to give it a fair shot. I said, look, to take something on like this and to make it become a burden for the family, right? That's not going to work. That's going to make, that's not the way to do it. So I said, but it's not a burden. I said, it's a burden for them. You have your reasons why you're doing it and you're psyched about it, but that's not going to roll for them. I said, you either want to pick a different thing that might be easier and something you could do as a family, or, on your own, do your thing. So he said, well, I'm not going to make my, I don't want to have to make a separate meal. Like, they're all going to eat their seafood and I'll eat something else at that meal. I said, you could do that. I said, if you were on a diet or you had an allergy, that's what you would do. So he says, I don't know. That's kind of crazy. So I said, okay, I said, you know what? Let's do something a little bit different. I said, how about you make it that the lunch that you eat every day, he was a brown bagger. He was a brown bag lunch guy. I said, how about you make the lunch that you take every day, have that be a kosher meal? Because that's something that's not going to get in the way of the family. You can do it on your own. It's your own meal that you're making, your peanut butter and jelly sandwich with a piece of fruit, a granola bar, and whatever else you want to throw in there, a salad, whatever. I was like, it's not going to get in the way of the family. And then it won't be this burden. So that's what he started doing. And, now he took on some other things, and he ended up his whole lifestyle really changed. And his kids started to appreciate more this version of their dad, of being this guy that was just had a different tone. He started carrying himself a little bit differently. And then at some point, his family said, look, Dad, we're not ready to do that whole crustacean thing, but how about we don't? And the family started doing some small things once they learned to appreciate this concept of what their dad was trying to do. So I think it's really something very special, but it's a perspective that we need to have. God gave us 613 mitzvos. That's a lot of mitzvos, right? Hold on, that's my alarm beeping over here. So God gave us 613 mitzvos. One of the reasons they gave us all those mitzvos is so that we have lots of mitzvos to do, which can give us lots of merits and lots of awesome opportunities, right? Another reason he gave us all the mitzvos is each of the mitzvos have a particular role, have a particular space in our lives. And we need to go ahead, or we have the opportunity to go ahead and find the right ones or whatever it is and bring it into our lives. So the more we have is the more opportunities we have, more opportunities to connect to Hashem, more opportunities to find out more about ourselves. And I think this particular mitzvah in the Torah teaches us this concept of when we miss out on something, right? Do we say, oh man, like, all right, you know what? God understands, or all right, I missed that mitzvah. All right, next time, right? Which is could be somewhat of a healthy approach because then we don't get upset at ourselves too much when we mess up. But it's also important to recognize that, like, hey, wait, pretty big deal that I missed out on an opportunity. The other day, it just happened to me. Like I said, I try to pray with a minyan with a minyan 3 times a day. We'll end with this, and I changed my schedule up the other day, and usually I do a 3 o'clock afternoon service is what I do, and then because of my schedule got shifted, I totally missed on the fact that I didn't pray the afternoon service that day. And by the time I got to the evening service, it was already 9 o'clock at night. So I had missed out on the opportunity of doing the mincha afternoon service. And I only remembered it while I was doing my silent Amidah service of the evening service. I remember, like, middle of my quiet, silent Amidah, I was like, man. And it was just a strange feeling of, I was like, all right, I messed up. And then I was like, no, you didn't just mess up. That was more about I missed another opportunity in my day where I have my time to talk personally with God, and I missed it. And it really was a shame. And but it doesn't happen too often. But it was an opportunity for me to reflect on what it means to have missed that opportunity. So I just think it's a perspective. It's a way that we shift ourselves. So God willing, over the course of Shabbos, over the course of the weekend, and as we travel through life, we should be searching for opportunities. Search for opportunities for growth. Search for opportunities for connection. If we're not so aware of the mitzvos, there's great ways to learn more about the mitzvos and understand what their practical purpose is, what their relevance is, what kind of awesome impact it can have on our lives. And so we should merit to do that and keep that kind of positive approach about it. Don't think of it as being a burden, rather see it as a beautiful opportunity to connect and to accomplish amazing things. So that is one of the beautiful ideas from the Torah portion. 2 of the ideas. So everyone should have an awesome Shabbos.